What's going on, Chiefs Nation? This is the RGR Football Channel. My name is Daniel Harms. And before we get going, I should probably take that off because that's not true. It's not the Q&A right now. So there we go. That's much better. As you know, my name is Daniel Harms, film analyst here at RGR Football, and I have a special guest. This is the third iteration of the Dinner with the Enemy, the final one, and it's the one maybe most of you dislike the most because this is about the Denver Broncos. We have a special guest, like I said, Nick Kendall, NFL Draft, and Denver Broncos analyst for Mile High Huddle. You can find him on Twitter at Nick Kendall MMH. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thank you very much. It's MHH, so Mile High Huddle. So hopefully,
My
unless I messed up.
apologies.
No, it's okay. That's a tongue twister, but it's Monday, right? No, doing well. Excited to talk some football, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate a chance to come into enemy territory. I got to tell you, growing up, I had a lot of Chiefs fans, family as well. So I did have a Tony Gonzalez jersey growing up, also. So I don't hate the Chiefs. I'm getting tired of you guys beating my Broncos, but I don't have the hate for them that a lot of people do.
It's nice. So yeah, I'm looking at your Twitter handle right now, and I just squished them together, so I saw MMH. So that's my bad. It's MHH, guys, like you said. So yeah, we'll get that right to it. So yes, obviously the Denver Broncos have been, well, originally were a thorn on the Chiefs' side during the Alex Smith era. They had Peyton Manning, the defense, and things like that.
Yeah.
Things have flipped a little bit, and now Patrick Mahomes has been revelation for the NFL, has dominated the AFC West for the last 7 years. Actually, not 7 years. He hasn't started for 7 years, but they've won the AFC West for the last 7 years. This is preseason. Training camp's going, and I want to start this off by getting your temperature on the Denver Broncos. What are you kind of expecting out of them? How are they looking in training camp, and overall expectations of the team this year?
Man, it's so hard. I always try to warn Bronco fans from getting a little bit too excited about it because training camp is always a zero sum. When you hear those matchups, like, oh, the edge rushers are dominating today in training camp. Well, that means the offensive tackles are getting their butts whipped. So it's been a lot of excitement for the Broncos' depth at the edge position. They have some young players that have really stepped up. And just in general, Russell Wilson kind of starting to look a little bit better and more comfortable in the offense. But the first game against the Arizona Cardinals just this last Friday on a absolute joke embarrassment of a playing surface. I don't know if you saw that this week, but I'm glad there was no serious injuries from that.
Yeah.
But terrible playing surface, and the Broncos lose last minute, fourth stringers, guys that probably aren't going to be on the team. So can't really take too much from that. But the Broncos offense, a lot of their first stringers did play the first 4 drives of the game and only resulted in 7 points. Now we can get to the Broncos kicking game situation, which is a whole different conversation. But I think some of Broncos country, the fan base, is a little bit on edge following the Broncos, how they looked in a small sample size, 4 drives, versus the lowly Arizona Cardinals. So what's the temperature? I think it's slightly optimistic, but a little bit more panic following the Cardinals game.
It's funny you mentioned panic. The Chiefs had a drive in their, like, the Chiefs starters had a drive on offense in their preseason game against the Saints, and I swear you get on Twitter, it's like they're the worst team. Like, they got significantly worse from last season into the first preseason game. So there's always a little bit of reaction to the first preseason game. It's the first time a lot of these players have been really actually hitting since the regular season. For the Broncos, it was the regular season. It was December, beginning of January, when the last time they actually got hitting. So it's hard to really take much out, but it's a brand new offense. We'll say brand new because, they have a brand new head coach who's going to be doing some different things and not taking Russell Wilson for every offensive interval that he'll try to get in there as the play caller, if you will. So let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about it. This is going to be Sean Payton and Russell Wilson experiment because there's still a way for the Broncos to get out of the Russell Wilson contract in a year or two, if I'm not mistaken. We call them the outs because that's the least amount of money that they'll have to continue to pay over that contract. So how do you expect Russell Wilson is going to return some of his value from previous iterations? Do you expect that to happen this season?
I don't think we're ever going to see Russell Wilson that was the all-pro continuous, considered one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL. I think that has a lot to do with just the talent, the young ascending talent specifically in the AFC at the quarterback position. But I do think the Broncos can salvage some value from Russell Wilson. I believe that last season was extremely humbling and eye-opening
Yeah.
for him. And also, I think he kind of realized that there is a certain style of football that he plays best in. And I think he's going to listen to what Sean Payton has to say, and they're going to put him in the best situation. The Broncos ran he only had 14 dropbacks, and 5 of those were play action. The play action designs, I think, looked really actually pretty good from Sean Payton. There were guys running pretty wide open in those looks. So I think that they can somewhat salvage Russell Wilson on the contract. The question is going to be, is he still, Sean Payton's guy? And after this year, well, the Broncos would still be on the hook for a lot of money if they moved on from him. I think it's something like 16 or 20 million that becomes guaranteed for 2025 on the 5th day of the league year this offseason. So they have to make a decision this offseason for 2025. Otherwise, they're going to be out a lot of guaranteed money. So it's going to be interesting to follow, without a doubt. How's Wilson looking? He was starting to cook, I guess, so to speak. Air quotes for those listening, not watching. Against the Broncos defense over the last few training camp sessions. But again, it's training camp at zero sum. What I can say, just watching him, a limited sample size from practice and whatnot, he does look slimmer. He does look a little bit more twitched up, and the arm looked a little bit more live from what I saw. It just didn't look as sluggish as we saw from last season. So again, I think they can salvage him. But just like in Seattle, the best Russell Wilson is going to be complementary off of a strong rushing attack with play action and vertical shots.
Yeah, I think we can all kind of see the deep ball's still there. He's got the deep ball. That's one thing that, Tyler Lockett has really made a career off of, being the guy that catches the deep ball now from Geno Smith, previously Russell Wilson. And they're going to be able to still do that. Last year, towards the end of the season, you saw them start to complete some of those deep shots when they got rid of Nathaniel Hackett and started to go back to kind of the basics of the offense. And he was doing a good job. Offensive line problems aside last year, towards the end of the season, I do think Russell Wilson had much better offensive optics. So being able to get outside the pocket, work a little bit, run the ball just a tad is what's really going to allow him to be the best of himself. And I think that, like you said, him being slimmer this year probably helps in that regard, because he didn't have the let's just say the athletic twitch that we once saw in Seattle. Yeah. So I still believe that Sean Payton is one of the only guys that's going to be able to get as much out of Russell Wilson now as anybody else can. So I just mentioned the offensive line. Last year it was in shambles, injuries just all over the place. How is the offensive line situation playing out in your eyes right now?
I think it is probably the biggest concern on this team right now, considering the resources that the team poured into it and how they looked against, let's just call it, not great talent from the Arizona Cardinals this last game. Russell Wilson was the highest pressure rate quarterback of any quarterback with at least 5 dropbacks in the first week of preseason. I believe he was pressured on 64% of his dropbacks, which is small sample size, so only 14 dropbacks, but not great. Arizona also was playing like it was, Buddy Ryan out there with sending, cover 0, 7 guys rushing the quarterback. So we'll see how that translates. It did not look great early on, but definitely some concerns on the offensive line. Mike McGlinchey has a knee sprain. The Broncos spent huge money on him this offseason. Quinn Miners at right guard, a fun player from Wisconsin Whitewater, entering his 3rd season. Really good athlete, really good in the run game. Issues in pass protection, gets a little bit over his heels, can tend to lean and then get beat. They paid huge money for Ben Powers from Baltimore. He didn't look phenomenal in the game as well. There's a few plays. I think LJ Collier got him a few times, kind of an inside-outside pass rusher from TCU, I can't recall. And then Garrett Bowles looked really not very good as well. He's working his way back from a broken leg, suffered week 5 last year, but he looked bad. I mean, just straight up not very good against Lucetta out there at Arizona, a few other guys. That I don't even know who that is. So
played
definitely
Penn State last year, 2 years ago.
Yeah, I remember Lucetta. There was another guy too at Arizona that beat Bowles a few times. So just not great from the offensive line. That being said, kind of like last season, I think that the Broncos their pass to run ratio in that first game was 2-1. That's not going to be the case in the regular season. I think they were working on a lot of pass concept stuff that, that's what preseason is for. And when it actually comes, to real football, in order to play the offensive line to its strengths, in order to protect Russell Wilson, I think you're going to see a much more even split, much more physical up front. So you won't have the offensive line playing on their heels as much. But week one, definitely, or preseason game one, definitely concerning because they got beat up. The first team offensive line got beat up, and it was most of the starters.
Yeah, that makes sense considering both of the players they brought in free agency come from the Ravens and the 49ers, and those are two teams that you're like, they run the ball, they're physical, and they want to do that. Yeah. So it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, that they want to try to get Russell Wilson comfortable in the passing concepts and work some things out. That's what the preseason's for, man. So that's what it's for. Yeah. And I can't even imagine coming back from a broken leg less than a year later trying to play on that. So good for, Garrett Bowles getting out there, getting some of the rust off, and hopefully, all things aside, we wish for health. That's what the one thing of the preseason is. If you come out of the preseason healthy, I think that's the best for everybody. And mentioning the run game, the guy coming off of injury, Javonte Williams, apparently is miraculous. The recovery has been better than most people expected. How, to your eye, is he progressing so far this offseason?
I feel like the word miraculous is thrown around too much, things being just extraordinary, but he suffered a significant knee injury, tearing his ACL and MCL week 5 against the Raiders. And I don't think there's ever been a player in the history of the NFL that has suffered a knee injury that catastrophic and come back as quickly as he is projected to be. It's George Payton, the Broncos general manager, did a interview in Arizona with some of the Denver media, saying that they expect Williams to be 100%. They say that he's going to be out there getting reps versus the 49ers, and it really is an unprecedented recovery. So, shout out to him. I'm sure Williams is working incredibly hard to get back to that. Shout out to modern medical science for even getting to that point too, but it does sound like, I can't believe it. All offseason, I was like, the Broncos have to make another move for running back. Javonte Williams might never even look the same, and he still might not because we have not seen him on the field, but it sounds like he is going to be good to go. And that's been one of the reasons the Broncos have been not super aggressive on the running back market. There's still a number of okay running backs out there, veterans that you could bring in. Broncos have been slow playing it because it does sound like they are planning on Javonte Williams. So my family's from Missouri, my dad's side. So I got a little bit of show me state in me. So I got to see it to believe it from Williams. But it sounds like he's going to be starting, and they expect him to be ready to go. And when he was his rookie season, he led all running backs in the NFL in yards after contact per carry. We all know how Sean Payton likes to use the run game and the running backs in the pass game and the run game. So he's probably going to be a huge part of the offense if he is healthy. I have to see it to believe it, but if he's back, that's going to be unbelievable. And shout out to him and everybody involved with that comeback.
Yeah, that's incredible. Good for him, everyone. My fantasy team salute you. Like, I have quite a bit of Javonte Williams because he was so cheap this offseason. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to see him from that regard. Obviously, I think doesn't need to be said, but I will say it. Always rooting for players coming off injury, regardless of where they are, because you never know if they're ever going to get back to what they were, like you said. So hopefully he's able to get back to that, and he's as explosive and physical of a player as he was beforehand, and just don't do it against the Chiefs. All right, Javonte, just kind of take that away. But the wide receivers have been an area of intrigue over the last couple of years. Last year, people were talking about that being the best group that Russell Wilson's ever played with. Some things getting thrown around. Your Portland Sun. Now you have obviously drafted Marvin Mims in the second round last year, trading up to go get him, and still have Jerry Jeudy. There was speculation one of these guys would be traded with Tim Patrick healthy, but unfortunately, Tim Patrick suffered another season-ending injury. Nothing but prayers for him, because that's just I feel for the guy. 2 seasons in the preseason where you don't get to play, like that's
training
that's
camp
tough.
Even before preseason.
It's tough, man. Hopefully he's able to get back again. I hate saying it, just hopefully he's able to do it. But how do you think the wide receiver room is going to play out this year? And now you have one less man on deck with Tim Patrick out. How are they looking this year?
They even have 2 guys less because KJ Hamler was found to have a heart condition, and he was medically waived as well. He could be back, but right now he's out there and he's dealt with a number of injuries as well. So Tim Patrick, losing him is really a big blow because I think he played with probably the most tenacity of anybody on the offense, not named Javonte Williams, kind of bringing an edge and a physicality that this team has really lacked. For almost a decade now. I mean, even with Peyton Manning, they kind of lacked a certain level of physicality that a lot of the teams are getting by with in today's NFL. So that's a big loss. Jerry Jeudy, it's kind of a bleeper get off the pot year for him. He's
Yeah,
entering year
yeah.
4 of his league. Now, it hasn't always been his issue. He's played with a number of quarterbacks. There's been a lot of stuff this offseason where it had been easy for him to, come on social media, complain, or do something like that. And he's been pretty quiet. So I'm thinking maybe this is a year that Jerry Jeudy, he's still, I think, only 23 years old, really young. He was a young rookie coming in. So this is a year that I expect him to show out. And it sounds like Cortland Sutton also has been, it's the offseason. Everybody's in the best shape they've ever been. But
Yeah.
Cortland Sutton, dropped 10, 15 pounds. His muscle percentage is higher. And people are talking about him looking much quicker and stronger. So it's going to be interesting to see how they use the wide receivers. I'm thinking that if the offensive line is as bad as it looked in that first game, you're going to see a lot of trying to isolate Jerry Jeudy with quick hitters and using his route running in order to put less stress on the offensive line and give Russell Wilson some easy, here's the pressure, there's your read kind of stuff with Jeudy, which he questions about physicality with him, questions about, contested catches and whatnot, but guy can get open. There's no question about that. So hopefully that'll translate well. Marvin Mims has been injured a bit, but he's started to come on a bit. He didn't play in that first preseason game because they're still taking it easy with him, but Broncos traded up for him. So I expect him to have a large role. And there's an undrafted free agent from last year who got hurt last year that was making a lot of noise that's was actually listed as second team wide receiver in Brandon Johnson, who they were really impressed with him last season. He had an injury. I think right now he's in the top 3 or 4 of that unit as well. Physical receiver, somebody to keep an eye on as well for a deep sleeper. He's right there, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ends up being the third in terms of reps this season, maybe even beating out Marvin Mims as well, because they've really been impressed with him.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't even know who he was. So that's cool to hear that you have an undrafted player that could be that big involved in the offense. Probably the Tim Patrick player replacement kind of thing you're thinking. So yeah, that makes sense. One thing I've been thinking about offseason, because you guys know I cover fantasy too. It'd be interesting to see them use Cortland Sutton like Sean Payton used Marquise Colston. Like that would be very interesting to see, because right now I think in the NFL you're seeing a lot of big slots. And with the way nickels and safeties are coming down and play the slot, you have smaller guys. It makes a lot of sense to exploit that with size, and especially if he's a little bit quicker and stronger than he was last year coming off of the injury. I think that would be a really interesting way to use him and probably get the most out of him at this point, because save some of the contested catch stuff. You don't have to always be going, we see Mike Williams with the Chargers, who just kind of lays out for everything he possibly can, and he's hurt all the time because of it. So I think that would be a little bit fun for me personally to see. But at the end of the day, I like the wide receiver room. And you're talking about the guy Ben Johnson. That'd be very interesting to see get in the mix with Marvin Mims, who I think a lot of people expect to be that deep threat in this offense. So yeah, I think that collectively looking at the offense, again, the bones of it I think are good. The offensive line's a question mark, but Sean Payton is a very good schemer, play caller, can figure out some of the issues with the offensive line, tailor it to their best ability. Whether the offensive line is going to be an issue if they deal with some injuries, we'll see here and there. But I still believe that there's a good chance that the Broncos offense is good this year. I believed last year. Was wrong. I believe it again this year, and we'll see. I think there'll be, because honestly, the games last year between the Chiefs and the Broncos were competitive. They were high scoring, and even the ones that shouldn't have been ended up being competitive. So there's just, you never really can tell with how they're going to shake up in these matchups. And right now, with the Chiefs defense missing Chris Jones, and there's no end in sight for what's going to happen there as we're recording this anyway. I don't have any news on Chris Jones, but that makes the defense for the Chiefs a little bit worrisome with the wide receivers, considering Jerry Jeudy kind of destroyed them last year. So.
And it will be interesting. I did want to talk real quick. The Sean Payton historically has been one of the lowest 11 personnel guys. So how much big slot will there actually be? They will use 11 personnel, but it's not going to be overwhelming. I'm expecting a lot of 12. And 21 out there as well. The Broncos traded for Troutman. He's listed first on the depth chart, a little bit more of a why. He had some awesome blocking reps on the run game this last week. And then Dulcich is a little bit of a H-back, the flex tight end out there that they're going to utilize as well. So I'm expecting a lot of more condensed offensive looks out there, trying to force defenses into base packages or cover one single high safety looks and then hitting them over the top with play action. But you have to be able to run the ball for that to work. You have to have your tight ends be good enough blockers for that to like get linebackers on the field instead of safeties. So we'll see how it works. But the tight end room is going to be interesting to follow as well, because Dulcich right now, not a good enough blocker to be that first tight end on the field.
For sure. Yeah, and that's kind of where the direction I think the NFL is going right now with passing, and the running game is coming back, honestly. Like people last year, it's been talked about all offseason. Yards per carry was the highest ever been in the NFL. I do think that makes a lot of sense, and getting Dulcich in those 12 personnel looks could be like the big slot. You can move him around, things like that. So yeah, that's also fun to think about from an offensive perspective. I think Sean Payton can have fun with this group and really get the best out of them. And I honestly had forgotten about Troutman for a second, but yeah, he's going to be heavily involved, and especially if their offense needs help, he's going to have to be an inline blocker a lot of the time. So yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on, especially for you fantasy folks that want to know what's going on with Greg Dulcich. I think he's going to be involved pretty heavily in the passing game, but we'll wait and see. Let's flip the script now. The defense has always been, at least for the last few years, we can remember the defense being a highly top part of the Broncos team. Vance Joseph is back, right? He's back in Denver, and there's been some turnover up front. How big is the loss of Draymond Jones going to be for the Denver Broncos this year?
I think it can be pretty big. I mean, he's been a very versatile inside-outside piece for the Broncos the last 4 seasons, one of the better interior pure pass rushers in the league. And how Ejiro Evero was able to isolate him in matchups with twists and stunts, something that they're going to miss. The Broncos did pay big money for Zach Allen from the Arizona Cardinals coming back with Vance Joseph from Arizona. So hopefully he can translate. I didn't think he had a great matchup against the Cardinals, but I thought that he played pretty well overall so far in training camp. He's been doing well now. Is that the offensive line depth? It's the zero-sum thing, always comes back to training camp. But excited to have Vance Joseph back as the defensive coordinator. And I'm also excited to see what he can do. It sounds like he's been working a lot in hand with Broncos have a young rising star defensive coach by the name of Christian Parker, who will be a defensive coordinator this time next year. And he's been working a lot with Christian Parker, trying to implement Vic Fangio concepts, Ejiro Evero concepts into what Vance Joseph wants to do. But it sounds like Vance is kind of running what was done last year and the years prior. So we'll be curious to follow, but keep an eye out and an ear out for the name Christian Parker. He is very highly thought of in coaching circles around the league. It's just a matter of when, not if for him.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. As you all know, my daughter likes to make an entrance in just about everything that I do because she doesn't know how to stay in her room. So my apologies to that. But yeah, I'm very interested to see how the Broncos front is going to look. You're talking about them having some really nice rotational pieces right now. I don't know if it's still this way, but Baron Browning was on the PUP list to start. Is he still on there right now?
Yeah. I would be surprised if we didn't see him until mid-season this year. It sounds like it's a significant enough injury, and the depth on those spots have been actually pretty good. Broncos used the 64th overall pick last season on pass rush specialist Nick Benito. Last year he looked like a off-ball linebacker trying to play edge sometimes, just beaten up by offense tackles. All they had to do was get wide enough and they could beat him. He looks different in his jersey this year. Apparently he's been one of the guys working the hardest to transform his body. He's added speed to power to his repertoire as well. He's never going to be a great edge setter, but extremely bendy and bursty. Kind of reminds me of a Bruce Irvin type of guy. So kind of versatile, coming in on third down, pure speed rusher. Jonathan Cooper from Ohio State had a heart issue, fell to the 7th round because of that. The Broncos scooped him up. He's looked really good out there as well. Third-year player for the Broncos there. And then they also have always extremely talented, never dependable because of injury and other things, Randy Gregory out there as well. I mean, he still looks like an alien. Like you're a trench guy as well. You watch him on tape and it's like, that guy moves different. That looks like a lottery pick along the defensive line. He still does if he can stay healthy. and then Frank Clark as well, kind of in that rotation. So excited about the edge rotation. I don't think they have any superstar guy out there that, matchup proof kind of dude, but seems like the edges this year, as long as they can stay healthy, should be okay with a solid rotation of guys.
Yeah, selfishly, I wanted Baron Browning to be that guy because coming out of Ohio State, I was like, this he's different. He moves differently.
Yeah.
He's fast. He's powerful. He's bendy. He's athletic, and he was flashing all of that last year before he got
Yes.
hurt. So
Yep.
I think that if he were to start the season, which is, like you said, probably not going to happen, he would have been able to do that for them this year, to be that guy that might be your one-off. Just go beat the tackle. Just always do that. I think that he's got the ability to do that. Now, I believe this is his second NFL injury. Nicked up before this more severe injury, but he's dealing with some injuries, and unfortunately, that's kind of how it works with some of these, I guess you could quote unquote smaller outside linebackers, defensive ends. They win predominantly with athleticism, and sometimes that can be a little bit of a problem. But you mentioned Frank Clark. Well, let's talk about it now. Frank Clark is in Denver, and you all know you hate Frank Clark now because he's in Denver. But I think that the best of Frank Clark that the Chiefs got was just a guy that's gonna come in and be effective when the game's on the line. Like, it felt like he's one of the guys that did ramp up his game when the Chiefs or the team that he played for needed him to. So I think Denver will get that out of him. He's definitely a rotational pass rusher. So I think we all understand that he's not the guy that he should have been in Kansas City as the starter. Like, that's just not what he is anymore. And it's interesting you talk about Nick Bonito. I was interested about him coming out of Oklahoma 2 years ago, and you're watching him last season, and you're like, okay, sometimes it's hard to see the trajectory for a guy like him coming out of Oklahoma, who could be like considered a tweener. And you talked about him looked like he was a tweener last year. We're going to probably see a little bit better out of him this year. So that's interesting to see. Lots of rotational players. So specifically when it comes to pass protection, there's always a wave. You guys remember the Philadelphia Eagles defensive line from last year? It felt like they could just continuously send waves of defenders at you. That feels at least what the Broncos are trying to accomplish on their defensive line this year. Lots of players that they can continuously send at you. So that's interesting. It's going to be tough to go up against that with another. Sorry, guys. She just continuing to cough in my ear, which she said she was going to be quiet, but yeah, we all know kids don't care. But the pass rush for Denver, I think, is going to be just fine, and hopefully, as a selfish Baron Browning fan, that he gets back to his health and is able to compete for the Broncos this season.
And I think with the depth that they have at edge, there's just no reason to rush him right now. Get healthy, and then when you're ready, that's fine. We'll see if Nick Bonito suffered sounds like a slight hip injury in that game. So preseason things happen, but worth following. But I'm a Browning fan as well. Don't forget about him, but it's probably second half of the season kind of thing with him.
Definitely. So yeah, always want these guys to get healthy, get better. Speaking of get better, something that Patrick Surtain has only done ever. I feel like the guy just continuously gets better. There's some familiar faces in the secondary. The safeties are still going to be Kareem Jackson and I'm the other guys for
Justin Simmons.
Justin Simmons. We've seen him the last 3 years. The guys have been together almost, I think. And outside of those three, Patrick Surtain and Simmons and Jackson, how are they going to look outside of those guys? And they have 1-2 spots you're trying to get with the outside corner and slot. So how is it looking? Not named some of the best defensive secondary players in the NFL.
Well, I think I can't not talk about Justin Simmons to start, because he's had one of the best training camps he's had out there. He's been all over the field. They're still kind of playing a lot of that split safety, pre-snap, roll one down kind of stuff. And he's been just all over the field. I don't think it's a coincidence that Russell Wilson started playing better in camp as soon as Justin Simmons suffered a slight groin injury. So I think that's worth monitoring. I think he's going to have an unbelievable season. He has the skill set that I don't think is going to diminish too much with age. So I'm excited to see what he can do this season. Another year with Christian Parker as the defensive back coach. The Broncos did list a split competition using that or out there in the first depth chart released. So they do have Kareem Jackson back, but I think everybody is excited to see if former 5th-round pick Caden Stearns, a former 4-star recruit, I believe, at Texas, can step up. Really good athlete. Last season, when he was healthy, was one of the most efficient per snap play on the ball players in football. And then he suffered an injury and missed most of the season after that. But he's somebody who's been flying around who they're really excited about as well. In Caden Stearns, cornerback Patrick Surtain, obviously incredible player. I think it's not arguable he's a top 3 cornerback in football. You can want to argue he's first, he's second. That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't care. He's unbelievable. And opposite him, they have 4th-round pick last season, Damari Mathis, who had a really tough first game in the league. But then I think he's committed 4 pass interferences in that one game alone. But after that, started to settle down a little bit. Physical cornerback and make some plays in the football. So he's probably seems pretty cemented as the boundary cornerback opposite Patrick Surtain right now. The Broncos did trade up for Riley Moss, but he suffered an abdominal injury. He's going to miss some time. And also, they have an undrafted free agent from last season who's had a pretty good camp as well, probably the first boundary cornerback off the bench in Jaquan McMillan, who had a really good career at, I want to say, Eastern Carolina. Eastern Carolina. So keep an eye out for him as well. But those are the guys that would probably stand out there. And you can't talk about the Broncos again. Probably the most underrated player on the team, in my opinion, Quan Williams, who's going to wear number 8 this year, the nickel cornerback. He's physical. He got, I think, ejected from a game last year for tackling through a blocker. And it was like, I don't understand the rules, I guess, but it was like something where like he pushed the blocker into the receiver and tackled him, and it was a penalty. I don't know. But really physical player, small, but just, packs a punch, super aggressive in run defense. So Broncos can actually effectively play nickel defense because he is so good in the run defense and physicality and tackling in space.
Yeah, if you guys will remember, the Denver Broncos have a couple of my guys from the draft this year. Not just mine, but Ryan's. J.L. Skinner was Ryan's guy, and they drafted him. Obviously, we'll see how that works out. Still, I'm worried that his legs might just break. I don't know. It seems like you never really know what's going to happen with those guys. I liked Thomas Income coming out of Central Michigan, and I saw him at the Senior Bowl. I liked what he did there. And Riley Moss, like he just talked about, I was big on Riley Moss at the Senior Bowl. Loved what he could do. If he was healthy, I think that he would challenge for the starting role. But obviously, with an injury, like an abdominal injury, you definitely want to take that slow. You do not want to rush anything like that back, especially with how, you always have to kind of be backpedaling, being able to change direction quickly. A lot of that involves hip movements, rotating your body, and that's not something you want to mess with. So the secondary, I think, is in good hands for the Broncos, as it always seems to be, and they're always one of the toughest outs to play in the NFL, regardless of who's at the defensive coordinator. That they find a way to get their players in the best situations. And I believe, we talked a few years ago about drafting Patrick Surtain, and sometimes you just take the guy and you figure it out later. And he seems to be figuring it out right now. Like you said, who cares if he's number 1, number 2? I think he's the top 2 corner in the NFL, and he's just a guy you want to stay away from for the most part. He's going to find a way to come down with a football, or at least help somebody else to do that. So not any easier this year for the Chiefs in throwing the football. And when you throw the football, as much as Patrick Mahomes does, sometimes you're going to have interceptions. Last year, we remember the interception game from the Broncos where Josie Jewell just continued to pick off Patrick Mahomes anywhere. The magnet on his hands just happened to be everywhere. And the linebacker group it's intriguing to me because they draft Drew Sanders in the 3rd round. They have Alex Singleton. I believe he was from Philadelphia 2 years ago, correct? Like he was okay. So that was 2 years ago, and you have this interesting mesh of players, and I'm interested if you think Drew Sanders is going to factor in, and if he does, how is he going to factor into this linebacker group in the room this year?
I think that you'll see Drew Sanders in sorry if you can hear the siren out there. I'm in a medical complex. So, I think Drew Sanders will factor in a rotational sense because he's going to be a pressure player for them. And it does seem like a defense that is going to send linebackers a lot. I mean, last year, I think the Broncos had the 4th highest blitz rate of any team in the NFL. And I expect that to continue with the linebackers, especially because I'm not a huge fan of the bodies on the interior defensive line right now. So I expect linebackers, especially on 3rd down, for them to use a lot of simulated pressures and whatnot like they used last season. Sanders probably does have a role in that, but from the preseason game and just, this will only be a 2nd year playing that stack linebacker spot. He's still a little bit off in terms of the processing, the instincts, and understanding how to come from the 2nd level and disengage blocks and whatnot. So I think you're pretty safe with Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton there.
Mhm.
Neither of them are, unbelievable athletes at the position, but they're smart and in the right position a lot. And that's pretty much what you need from your linebackers more than the splash plays, in my opinion, at least. Just be
Mhm.
steady and keep the integrity of that back seven and don't give up the backbreakers. So I think both of them can do that pretty well if they can stay healthy. Broncos did suffer an injury from the linebacker spot from a young, promising linebacker named Jonas Griffith, who was apparently playing better than Drew Sanders in camp. His third year, he came from Indiana State, so small school guy, but height, weight, speed, been in the team for a bit. But they should be okay at the linebacker spot as long as those first two can stay healthy. Not amazing, but fine as long as the interior defensive lineman in front of them can hold up.
Yeah, it feels like the state of linebacker is if you don't have a stud linebacker, you just get fine play. If you get guys that are going to be in the position, like just be smart, know where you're supposed to be. Like that's kind of how the NFL is working it right now with this. It's almost like a linebacker transition where you have a bunch of these defensive ends that maybe transition to playing linebacker in college. They're athletic, but not all of them have it up here. That's why you see
It's
a lot of
processing.
it. Yeah, like trying to figure it out. It's extremely difficult to play. Obviously, calling plays as like a green dot linebacker, it's not easy to be able to play the run and the pass when you have to respect the run and then have to get back in your drops against like a play action pass, for example. So yeah, just get competent linebacker play. And I think most defenses are okay with that, especially when you have a back end like the Broncos do and the rotation up front that that they do as well. So what's one player, it could be offense or defense, that you expect to surprise people this year?
Oh man, one player. I mean, I guess it has to be Javonte Williams still, right? Like the fact that he's
Okay.
even going to play is unbelievably surprising. And with how much Sean Payton has utilized running backs in the pass game, I think Javonte Williams might end up being the third highest target getter in on this
Wow.
offense this season, because they have Samaje Perine as the backup. He's kind of a little
Mhm.
bit, thunder as well, which is jack of all trades. But I think Williams has a chance to like beat people. What was he going last year in the NFL fantasy draft? Second round, back
Yeah,
into the
he was
first.
up there second round. Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ends up being that guy again, just with how they are playing him right now and what the language they're using surrounding him. So that would be one that would be surprising for me. Opposite that, I guess people are going to be. I think a lot of people will still probably crap on Wilson. I don't know if I could say that on
Yeah.
here, but a lot of people will still talk down Wilson, even though I think he'll play better this year. It's not going to be like last season because they're going to put him in a better position to succeed. I just don't know if the offensive line is going to be good enough to fully unleash him because I think he's very much a quarterback who his best years were play action defenses really respecting the run game with Marshawn Lynch and the ability to hit the home run balls. Don't know if the offensive line is going to have the ability to do that this season, despite having Williams back and everything. Other than that, I mean, I just can't imagine it being a high enough volume passing attack overall for Judy or Sutton or Mims to be somebody that a lot of people are freaking out in the fantasy community, and not a lot of people are giving too much of a hoot about good edge rushers, not star players, et cetera, et cetera. So really, I think it's a lot of the same names you'd already know that I think will probably show themselves more on the national stage, just
Mhm.
because the Broncos are going to be competent this season.
Yeah, that would be. I'd be interested to see Javonte Williams be third in the target distribution. That would be not something I expected. But again, Sean Payton has the history with running backs, and I like
Yeah.
Pirine, but he's, like I said, he's definitely been more of a jack of all trades guy. If they can get Williams, who's going to be hopefully fully healthy and to handle a lot of those passes, that would add another layer to the passing attack, especially for Russell Wilson, who at this point seems to be. I need to find a way to get to the check down. You need to find a way to get there if it's not going to be
Yeah.
there. So I'm still, like I said, I'm still optimistic about the Broncos overall in terms of how they're going to be on the national stage. The offense, we know the defense is going to be good. I think the offense will be much better than it was last year, and it will challenge the Chiefs more, I think, than people expect because they just want to continue the dominance that they have had over the Broncos for 13 straight games. Just had to slide it in there for the
That's
fans.
okay. I remember the last one pretty well. So I will say the defense last year, I know that we're approaching 40 minutes here, but
Yeah.
the defense last year was really good when teams were not really respecting the Broncos offense. It's kind of like the
Mhm.
water boy where, they're
Yeah.
kneeling and whatnot because the Broncos offense was so incompetent. We could play really conservative offense and still win football games. It kind of changed once the Broncos started scoring points. So I'm curious to see if the defense can hold up in that regard. And I am pretty worried about the the belly of the defense overall. I don't know if they have. We talked about the edge rushers, talked about linebackers. I think everything is okay there. We'll see about cornerback too, because a good quarterback can just isolate one cornerback and go to town, which can be an issue. But I'm worried about the interior defensive line depth overall. They paid for Zach Allen. He's a little bit an inside-outside guy. DJ Jones is a really good defensive tackle, but after that, it's a bunch of question marks. I mean, Jonathan Harris last year was considered a starter in base. He was starting in base. He was off the 53, the first iteration last year. They have kind of a more pass rush specialist guy like Matt Henningsen. Mike Purcell hasn't played all year. So I am very concerned about teams that are just able to line up and rush the football and out physical the Broncos, because I do not think they have the horses on the interior defensive line to hold up against any team that's worth their salt in the power running game.
So what I hear you saying is I should take the over on 300 plus yards for Isaiah Pacheco in the 2 games against the Broncos. That's what I hear. You heard it, Chiefs fans. Just he's gonna tear it up.
It's possible. I'm not sure what they'll do with the defense and whatnot. They might have to utilize a little bit more base package. We saw that out there, but I just think the overall talent and depth on the defensive line is very much lacking.
Well, you guys heard it here again. Take the Isaiah Pacheco over. But again, thank you so much for joining us today. Nick, I want to let you, just kind of speak about what you do and things you're working on right now and give you the floor for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm entering, my 7th year, I think, at Mile High Huddle. Boss found me. I was just writing for fun. He's like, hey, you want to come write for me and make a little money? Sure, I'll do that. So been doing that now, write an article a week over there for Mile High Huddle, which is an affiliate of Sports Illustrated. And I do a lot of different live streams as well, mostly in the morning. I'm out here on the West Coast, so getting the morning shows doesn't disrupt my work too much, which is great. I cover the Broncos for Mile High Huddle there. I'm also covering the Atlanta Falcons with my co-host, Scott Kennedy, who worked for NFL Network for a number of years and one of the founders of Scout.com as well back in the day when they were first coming up. So covering the Falcons as well, doing shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning. So busy with the live streams.
Awesome, man. Well, you guys make sure to go check out his work. Also follow him on Twitter at Nick Kendall, MHH, and you'll be able to find all the stuff there. Great follow for draft season as well. But this is the last video for the dinner with the enemy as we get kicked towards the regular season. We're going to have more film content as soon as I get all 22 from the preseason, because it's still locked up somewhere in the NFL Plus vault that I can't access. So we'll work on that, and I'll get you guys some film reviews as soon as possible. We'll have more videos coming up. Seth will be on Thursday, or we're going to be working on more live streams for Fridays. As the season comes up, we're definitely going to be doing probably the Friday live streams for the game plan. So make sure you're checking those out. And obviously Mondays with the Q&A and Sunday night live. Hope you guys enjoyed this preview of the Denver Broncos with Nick Kendall. And I hope you guys continue to have a great week and go Chiefs, because this is always a great day to be a Chiefs fan. You guys have a fantastic week.